Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this special wine webinar with Jean-Pierre Chambas. Welcome, Jean-Pierre.
Welcome.
Jean-Pierre already arrived in the United States in 1972. He arrived in South Carolina, and he started straight ahead in the wine business. And he's been importing wine and distributing it in South Carolina for the past 40 years. And we are very happy to have him here tonight because he's going to explain to us the Beaujolais Nouveau, which is really special, as you know, because it's only sold on November 19th. And we're waiting for it to come out. And Jean-Pierre is going to tell us some history about it and how he came into the business. So Jean-Pierre, please, I'm giving you not the floor, but I'm giving you the screen. So
very good. I am on the Zoom now.
Yes, you are.
I have to say it's a premiere for me. I have never had the occasion of doing a wine tasting with people that I barely can see, and mainly without a glass of wine in my hand. But I decided I was going to be drinking while I'm talking, so I'll have a glass of Beaujolais shortly. Do you still me? Do you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Okay, I want to make...
Yes, we do, Jean-Pierre. You can start your presentation. Yes, we do.
Okay, I want to make sure. Okay, so anyway, it's a very interesting. It's a very interesting occasion to start a Zoom for me, and I used to do television, so I am not too shy about things, fortunately. But it's different. So I hope that I'll have the pleasure of passing on my passion for the business and for the wine, as I would if with a live audience. The Beaujolais Nouveau is a great story of a should I say, of modern marketing, and it's also something that is not new. It is not a new thing. Things used to be that way from the beginning of the time, since people were making any kind of what should I say, alcoholic beverage. That includes wine, beer, and spirits. But wine and beer, and wine particularly, is a symbol. It's a symbol of the fact that it's an agricultural product that start in the early spring, start in the winter, as a matter of fact, but in the early spring particularly, it's as a cycle, is go through the vegetation cycle, and it's like a food. It is something that is grows very slowly. It takes about 100 days to make a full-blown grape of resin, and you have generally a harvest time, which happened to be generally to be, should I say, early September, generally, and the wines are picked. It's generally almost a festive occasion. People volunteer to go into the vineyard, pick the grapes, bring them to the cellars, and where the wines are fermenting, and the wine is going to be put into vats where it is going to go through, particularly in Beaujolais, a very specific type of fermentation, which is a carbonic fermentation. That carbonic fermentation is an unorthodox way of making wine, but relatively easy. As you put the full bunch of grapes in Beaujolais, by law, you have to put the whole bunch in the vats. You dump them in the vats where the weight of the grape is going to eventually crush the bottom layers of grapes, and by the time the cuve are full, they are closed, and the maceration carbonic is going to start by itself. It's natural fermentation. As the bottom of the vat is, the grape are being crushed, they start automatically the fermentation, which is going to last about, in Beaujolais particularly, about 3 to 4 days, and allow, because of the fact that the grapes are not all crushed, it allows during the maceration to extract a lot of fruit and a lot of fresher in the wine, and a lot of, you should say, great, some of the best part of the vine, and particularly the antioxidant and the polyphenols, as well as resveratrol that protect the cardiovascular system. So you're getting a juice that is very fresh and outstanding and very fruity, light, easy to like, and makes a great introduction to the wine world to a lot of people. And this basically was an idea that was perpetrated throughout the age, as I said earlier, but really identify maybe as a way to promote a region. And in 1950 particularly, they realized that the region needed to be revamped. We were 5 years after World War II. Things were not very good economically. The Beaujolais was slowly but surely, dying, and something had to happen. And a lot of people were making, fortunately in Beaujolais, we were not into what you call a monoculture region. They would raise cows. They would have corn in the field. They would have, it's, as I say, multicultural agricultural area. But nevertheless, the wine was one of the biggest part of the revenue of a lot of farmers. And they decided that it would be a great thing, particularly in the fall, in November, to bring the new wine to market, what we call en primeur, meaning that the wine was basically finished, is malolactic, as soon as it finished, is malolactic fermentation, which is a second fermentation. In the barrels, the wine would be bottled and shipped to market. And you had to create some kind of event. And at the time, they're starting a motto that you may have seen, and you can see still in a lot of what you would say advertisement, saying Le Beaujolais Nouveau est arrivé. Le Beaujolais Nouveau est arrivé become a rallying cry to take people to the stores, and mainly at the time, particularly in the 50s, to take them to the tavern, to the bars, to the restaurants, in order to try the nouveau vin. And it become immediately some kind of what you would say, almost tradition. People were looking every year from the 50 on for the new wine arriving, particularly initially in Lyon. Interestingly enough, people don't think of the Beaujolais being part of Lyon, but in fact, they are in the département du Rhône. Most of the Beaujolais, particularly the meridional part of the Beaujolais, is in the département du Rhône, whose capital is Lyon, as you all know. And as a matter of fact, Beaujolais, the region was so intensely important to Lyon that the former mayor of Lyon, Monsieur Henriot, would say there are 3 rivers going through the city of Lyon: the Saône, the Rhône, and the Beaujolais. The Beaujolais was rallying beverage of most of the bars and little restaurants and little taverns of Lyon. To give you an example, in 1950, it was estimated that at least 1 million bottles of Beaujolais Nouveau were consumed in Lyon in the months of November. That tells you a little bit about the Beaujolais Nouveau. From there, it was taken to Paris, and in Paris, what they started, they were bringing the wine during the night into Paris and bring it in so people basically could have breakfast with a glass of Beaujolais on the third Thursday of November from 1950 on, and it became such a fad that people started organizing races. Whom would have, which one would get there first? The négociants, the owners, and which bar would have the first Beaujolais on the morning of. So it was really it became an occasion where they started organizing literally racing rallies from Beaujolais to Lyon to Paris, and in the 60s it got on, and they started organizing car rallies to London. So it was, the things were catching on. The press was getting involved. They were always having who was the best Beaujolais, having some competition to see who was producing the best Beaujolais, who had the best decor, who got it first, and they organized amazing stuff. I mean, that they would bring it on in parachute or something of that type. I mean, in trucks, the trucks were racing out of Beaujolais to Paris, for instance. So they even opened the highways, making sure that there will be no wrecks to arrive in good shape into Paris. And it caught on, and from London, it started saying, okay, well, we now have to go preach in Japan. The Japanese, by the way, are very fond of Beaujolais. For whatever reason, I think my friend Georges Duboeuf was very intensely involved in that fad with the Beaujolais in Japan, as well as Paul Bocuse, as a matter of fact, the famous chef, which happened to be like a brother to Georges Duboeuf. They were very close to one another, and the two of them, were really the head preachers of the Beaujolais Nouveau throughout the world. I mean, the quantity of Beaujolais Nouveaux that was sold, say, for instance, from 1951 to 2001, is absolutely colossal. We went to 1 million barrel drunk in Lyon, for instance, in the month of November for Beaujolais Nouveau, to 45 million bottle of consumption throughout the world in 2001. Think about that. I remember in America, and we still do, but I don't know this year because of the Chinese plague here, that if the thing was organized in the same fashion, but we would fly it in by the full boat, by the full load of airplanes, in order to have it in time to get it. It would be flown into Japan. It would be flown into Djibouti. It would be flown into London. It would be flown in everywhere in the world. And this was an extraordinary event throughout the world every November on the third Thursday of November. How did that happen? How did a small region and a relatively inexpensive wine was able to conquer the world in that fashion? Well, it took a lot of love of the region. Most of the people who participated in that were native of the region. One of the most important character, particularly with America, but also basically throughout the world. But the conquest of America, I think, was one of the most remarkable things that ever happened. Well, it was done because of one man, Georges Duboff. Georges was an extraordinary character. He was born in the middle of a little village of Quinchet in Beaujolais, and in 1933. Initially, he decided that maybe there were no room for him in his vineyard at home, because he already had an older brother, that was going to take over the property. But and he went to Paris and went to school. He went to school to study physical education and also physical therapy. But by the end of his studies, he realized that maybe he should go back to the vineyard and help his brother. So at age 22 or 20, he came back to Beaujolais, and very quickly realized that there were a lot of things that he could be doing, not only to help himself, but to help the region. And if you had any kind of enterprising ideas, he was the first gentleman to create a mobile bottling chain. And he had bought an old truck from, I think, the government, and installed in there a machine that could bottle wines, and he could take that truck to the property, to the vineyards. And for the next, basically, for the next 5 or 6 years, he went around the vineyard of Beaujolais, offering his services for bottling at the chateau or at the property a lot of the wine. This gave him an extraordinary oversight and of the Beaujolais, and allowed him to literally figure out where were the best producers, where were the best vineyards, and knowing the region better than anybody else. And in 1955, he decided to go in business for himself, and created a négociant house called Georges Duboff de Beaujolais. And as a négociant, he started buying from the best producers, which allowed him to acquire a great reputation for quality. And he started to also export. And one of his first contact in America was Alexis Lichine. Alexis Lichine was a Frenchman that himself was from Bordeaux, basically, and was a very entrepreneur and a great entrepreneur. And he created an import business in America called Alexis Lichine. Some of you may remember that. Some of you are too young for that. But Alexis Lichine was one of the first great importer of French wine in the United States. And he was also very important, not only in Bordeaux, but in Burgundy, because he had extraordinary contact throughout the world. And he went to see Georges Debuff and asked him to bottle wine for him. So Alexis Lichine was buying the wines of Georges Debuff, but was not selling them under the name of Georges Debuff, was selling them under the name of Alexis Lichine, his own négoce, in other words. And this started Georges started him to come to the United States, where he then realized that the potential of selling wine in America was amazing. And under the tutelage of Alexis Lichine, learned how to start, literally marketing and having great ideas for marketing the wines of Beaujolais. Packaging was very important. and he had the luck of having met a great woman who became a great friend of his, uh, Claude Clevenot. Claude Clevenot was literally, she had a nickname in the business. She was la grande couturière of the labels, la grande couturière de l'étiquette. She was a champion at packaging. She, as a matter of fact, was one of the main packaging uh, person for uh, for for Cartier, for instance, and for for the top luxury house of France. And she also was designing labels, and she had a great feel. We know today that most of the wine bought in chain stores or in stores are bought by women, and consequently, you had to change many of the packaging, making them appealing to the feminine, to the to the women who were buying, up to 80% of most of the wine bought in stores throughout the world, even today. So she created the labels with flowers, and then with time, when George decided to create his own brand in America, he and Alexis Lichine, we went through in the mid '70s, we went through a pretty rough time in the industry, and at that time, nobody in the wine world was really making money, including the chateaus of Bordeaux and Burgundies. I mean, it was not, things were pretty tough. And George decided to create his own brand because Alex Shilishin basically was decided to close down one of his imports in America, and Georges Duboeuf, with the help of a great gentleman called Bill Deutsch, started importing the Georges Duboeuf wine in the United States. And this is when I met personally Georges, because I was in many cases, Georges did not speak English. And when he came to America, I used to go to New York for big meetings that we had in the wine world, and I used to be his translator. So that's how we starting. We A great friendship was born. One of the things about the Beaujolais Nouveau, it is festive. It is maybe the last hurrah of the summer. It is the fall is on very often in many parts of the world, that it is the north of this country or the north of Europe. Uh, it started to get pretty rainy. The weather is starting to be the sun is away. We very rarely have Indian summer, really, as we call them, even in Europe. But the Beaujolais Nouveau and the arrival of the Beaujolais Nouveau, it's a little bit like the last ray of sun before a dreadful winter. So it's just a very short spring before the winter takes over. And it is festive. We're celebrating the harvest. We're celebrating all the work that has been done during the year to achieve not only the wine, but great harvest of all kind of fruit and vegetables. And it's a little bit like the beer fest in Germany or in the northern part of Europe, where there also we're celebrating the end of the year. And it's it's easy to do. It's simple. The wines are simple. We don't have to write books about them. They are fun. They are easy drinking. You can drink a lot of them and not really be too much affected. They're not going to kill you. And it's an occasion for a great dining occasion with friends and family. So it happens to be very often connected in America, particularly to Thanksgiving, which is also a great festive time for the American. And I think the fact that the what you would call the Beaujolais Nouveau was happening just before Thanksgiving in most cases, or just at the time of Thanksgiving, was also a great way to offer the wine of the year, very fun to drink, easy to drink, and that basically can go with about anything for Thanksgiving, and a great introduction to the wine world. So that's basically what what the Beaujolais Nouveau is about. But I think I'd like to take advantage of the fact that we're talking about the Beaujolais Nouveau to say that, you know, there is the other coins of the other side of the coin. The Beaujolais Nouveau very often has been misinterpreted by a lot of consumers by saying that the wines of Beaujolais are basically inexpensive wines that needs to be drunk very early, which is a fact. I mean, the best thing you can do is drink it in the next 3 or 4 months after the arrival in your cellars or in your house. But you know, we tend to be these days. We tend to be it's all black, it's all white, and people have heard too much for too long about the Beaujolais Nouveau. And what they have forgotten is the fact that the Beaujolais region makes two kinds of wine. They make the Beaujolais Nouveau, which most of the time come from the southern part of the Beaujolais region, which, as you know, is in fact part of the greater area of Burgundy in France. And it is the southern part of it is basically wines from the flats, from the plain, from very fertile area, from very fertile area of the Beaujolais, which is, as I say, the multicultural, the polyculture area of the region, where you have a field of corn next to a field of soja and next to a vineyard. So it's diversified, but it's also wines that are easy to make, easy drinking, but they don't have extraordinary personality. As I said, you don't write a book about Beaujolais Nouveau, but there is in the septentrional part of the Beaujolais, you have a region called the region of the village. The region of the village is more elevated. It is more hilly, and even gets, you know, basically what we call the not the montagne, but the mounts of the Beaujolais, which are basically like a Piedmont of a primary range of mountains, like the Blue Ridge in America, for instance. This is the same kind of primary thing, but not quite, as I say, they are the Piedmont of that part of the world. And but it's made of ancient volcanoes, and where you have a subsoil that is a lot more poor and difficult to work because full of generally rocks and heavy land. Where in the plains in the south of the Beaujolais, you have, as I said, land that is very fertile and basically made of alluvial subsoil carried generally through the flood of the Saône River. So you have two different regions, and one of the things that I'd like to point out tonight is the fact that the Beaujolais, contrary to what most people think, makes extraordinary wine in the northern part of that of the Beaujolais. And they have names, they have their own appellation. You know, Beaujolais is an appellation, but like most great appellation of France, is divided into sub-appellations, or generally appellations that every time you change an appellation, it's because the wines have enough characters and are different enough from the neighbor that they become entitled to their own name. So that generally is given by the main village or the main parish of that sub-region. So to give you an idea, you have actually 10 villages in Beaujolais that are entitled to an appellation contrôlée. You have Saint-Amour, and we're going to start in the south. And they have great names. You know, the first one in the south is Saint-Amour, which means, as you all know, the wine of love. Okay. The second one, a little going slightly more up north, is Juliénas. After the Juliénas, you got the Chenas. Then you get into Moulin à Vent. Then you get into Fleury. Then you get into Chirouble. Then you get into Morgon. Then you have Régnier, which is the latest that's the latest one of the appellation. It was created, that's the last appellation created. It was created in 1988. So you see, it's not that long ago. So it took a while for people to accept Régnier as an appellation of its own, but it is entitled to its own. And then you have Morgon, and you have Morgon, Régnier, you have Côte de Brouilly and Brouilly. Now, all these wines, contrary to what most people think, are wines that are worthy of your cellar. You can age them, and they age very well. I am pretty old at this days and time. As far as business is concerned, I'm a dinosaur compared to a lot of the young bucks that are in the business today. But I have had the privilege myself to drink wines from the Beaujolais, particularly from the northern region, like Morgon, or like Moulin à Vent, or like Brouilly or Côte de Brouilly, that were aged 20 and 30 years old or more. I can remember getting out of my father's cellar about 1975, 76, Moulin à Vent 1929, that was absolutely fabulous. And just to tell you that, you know, this is the way it was before World War II. They were making great wines already at the time, from basically the beginning of the century to World War II. Wines were made artisanally, but very often the old-fashioned way. People were not very familiar then with what you call the carbonic fermentation, and they were doing traditional fermentation, pressing the wine, aging it in not in barrels, but in big cuves, wooden cuves, and so forth. But the wine were literally made to age for a long time, and they were competing with the wines from Burgundy, the real wines from Burgundy that were made with Pinot Noir. And to the tune today is that very often, considering the price of most of the great Burgundies, you know, one of the things that we very often suggest to restaurants is when they want to offer a really good wine to serve by the glass in their restaurant, is to, instead of using what I consider a Pinot Noir that is overrated because it is already blended with some other things like sometimes Beaujolais, in order to stretch it a little bit, offer to the customer a wine from Morgon or from Moulin à Vent or from Fleury or from Brouilly, because these wines are absolutely delightful, have a lot of personality, and literally can talk back to you. I mean, they can literally get your brain going and say, this is really a nice bottle of wine to drink. And as a matter of fact, you know, I have been talking here for a while, but I am getting thirsty, and I am pouring myself a glass of Morgon. A Morgon come from Chateau de Pizet. The Chateau de Pizet is a very old estate in Burgundy. To tell you about the way this wine, how long they've been making wine on the estate of de Pizet. It's the first time that we find mention of the vineyard of de Pizet, not the chateau, but the vineyard of de Pizet is 1030. Yes, 1030. And it was mentioned into the monastery of Cluny, who was mentioning this wine as being one of the better vineyard of the southern part of Burgundy at the time. So it tells you that you have there a tradition of making great wine that were already appreciated 10th century ago. Is there problem with production today? No, because today, I think that thanks to the change in climate, we cannot call it a change of climate, I think, but it's the warming up of the earth at this time, which I believe is a cycle, because believe me or not, in the last thousands of years, they've had cold period, they had warm period, and they have cold period, and they had warm period. And during these times, you have had a lot of invasion, a lot of wars, a lot of pandemics, the plague, the many things of this type that basically made the region die a little bit, was revived a little bit, die a little bit, and so forth. But there have been some tremendous cycles in the last century in that part of the world. But nevertheless, you know, the De Pizet today is a chateau. The first chateau was starting to be built in 1070. That's when they built the first rampart around the huge towers that they had. And in the 14th century, they built the real chateau that is today the place where you can stay. This is one of these 5-star restaurant and hotel in the region, one of the best place to be in the region and stay in the region. But they've done an extraordinary job as keeping the chateau, keeping it up and make it something very, very friendly. The wines of the wine, they produce wine there too, which was wine coming from the region here. The wine that I'm drinking right now, to your health.
À ta santé, Jean-Pierre.
Santé, santé à tout le monde. Bonne santé.
Oui.
À la vôtre. This is a remarkable wine that is made of vines that are, this specific wine is made out of vines that were planted in 1915 at Chateau de Pizet. They're very old, they're very venerable. They produce a very small amount of wine to the tune of maybe 15 hectoliter per hectare, which is very, very low, but give an extraordinary wine. This, I can tell you, you could put that in a blind tasting with some top Burgundies today and literally confuse half of the crowd in drinking the wine, thinking that they're drinking a Pinot Noir. And that is remarkable. By the way, the Gamay, which his wine is made out of, I have to say, has a long history and very interesting. There's always been a debate in Burgundy about, and a fight between the pro-Pinot Noir and the pro-Gamay. The problem we have is the fact that it started several centuries ago. As a matter of fact, I think that if I am not mistaken, I have a note somewhere to tell me here when that happened, because it's interesting. They were fighting over these grapes very early, and I have to figure out where I can put my notes on that one. But where in the hell is this? Oh, here we go. I have some notes here. Yeah. The fights started in the 14th century. In 1395, Philippe le Hardy, which was Duke of Burgundy, at the time one of the most powerful sovereign in Europe, the Duke of Burgundy was richer than the French king, was literally had an incredible influence all over the northern part of France. And Philippe le Hardy decided that the Gamay Beaujolais, the Gamay grape, should be absolutely taken out of Burgundy, because the only grape that was supposed to be, he used to call it the infamous and unstable varietal of Burgundy. And he declared that every plant of Beaujolais, of Gamay, I'm sorry, Gamay, was supposed to be eradicated from Burgundy. By Burgundy, we're talking about the Côte de Nuit and the Côte de Beaune, right below Dijon, and not everywhere else. So the Gamay was basically pushed down south, and because his edict did not go further than basically the south of the Mâcon at the time. And but what Philippe le Hardy wanted to do, the Duke of Burgundy wanted to do, was to make sure that the only grape grown in Burgundy, what we call the real part of Burgundy today, the Côte de Nuit and the Côte de Beaune, were going to be the Pinot Noir and the Chardonnay. That was the two only grapes that were, because at that time the Gamay was considered, as I said, a grape that was not dignified of producing wine, particularly around the Pinot Noir. So basically, it was banned and was pushed down south, but what you would say, it's interesting to know that the Gamay that we have today has nothing to do with the Gamay that was at the time in Burgundy. The Gamay that we have today is a clone that is a result of a cross between the Pinot Noir, as a matter of fact, and another one called, at the time, called the Gamay Teinturier, which is basically a Mondeuse, which we found in Savoie today. But in other words, it became a bastard wine. It became a bastard varietal that, because of that, people literally initially did not want to use, particularly all the famous connoisseurs or people writing about wine in the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th century, did not really want to talk about. It was the bastard varietal. And the word bastard, of course, was no good what you would say meaning as far as the wine growers were going. But nevertheless, it took over the Beaujolais, and it is today what we call the Gamay Rouge à jus blanc, which means the red Gamay that produce white juice, like most red grapes do, as a matter of fact. This Gamay today produce, I think, a remarkable wine that we can drink, we can put in the cellars, and we have today. So this, and I am insisting on that because I think, and again, as great as the Beaujolais Nouveau invention was, as far as a marketing ploy was, to save the region, because basically what Georges Debuff did, he saved the Beaujolais region by his ideas, marketing ideas, and so forth. But I think, like everything else, like every fad, is taken too far. You know, it's like the rosé today. I mean, it took me 35 years to make America drink rosé, and I worked very hard at it. Where in the past 10, 15 years, rosé became uh, in, like a little bit the Pinot Noir came uh, in the in varietal coming out of California a few years back because of a movie, a silly movie, as a matter of fact. But you know, like every fad, they tend to be pushed too far. People bringing too much wine in the market. There's too much wine left over after the season. There's a lot of things that should not happen that has happened. The wine was oversold, and a lot of old Beaujolais Nouveau was sold later on. And when you buy too much of it, you keep it, and it ends up being drunk at the wrong time, which is when it's too old, and it makes, unfortunately, create a bad reputation for the region. And it was, as I say, pushed too far. And today, what I have done, and I do in my business, is trying to make sure that people understand that the Beaujolais region make simple wine that are very good, but also great wines that are worth putting in cellars and worth being cellared. I mean, the wine that I'm drinking here right now is 5 years old. It's not even ready to drink, I can tell you that. But, you know, why not? We are committing what I call vinocide, and I am delighted to share my vinocide with you. À votre santé.
Thank you so much, Jean-Pierre. You have given us a really good lesson on the Beaujolais Nouveau. You have told us stories that I never knew before. And we thank for all the participants to stay with us for the amount of time that you gave your presentation. And I was wondering if are you available for some questions? Just
yes, absolutely. One thing I would like to mention too is something that I should have mentioned earlier. You know, one of the great accomplices of the success of Georges Debuff was the Franco-American Chamber of Commerce.
Really?
From the beginning, the Chamber of Commerce was used to go from town to town and spread the word. So, like we have one here in South Carolina and in North Carolina, which is put together. But so, you know, Charlotte is a hub, basically. Columbia at the time was a hub. I mean,
yes,
I can tell you, in the 80s, I was bringing, at one time, I brought 2 containers at one time into the state. I had retailers buying half a container, which is basically 500 cases of wine, and be able to get rid of it in 3 weeks.
Wow.
That tells you something. Today, I hate to say that, but I do not buy Beaujolais Nouveau because the fad is gone. Doesn't mean the wine is bad. The fad is not there anymore. So
but, yeah. If some people listening to us tonight, then they want to order some Beaujolais, can you help them with that, or do they just go to the store?
No, unfortunately, this is not it's what I'm doing here is I'm trying to promote the Beaujolais region.
Yes.
I am a wholesaler and an importer, and I cannot deal basically with private people. Particularly, I don't cross the state because I do not distribute in North Carolina either.
Right.
But for instance, the wine that I'm drinking right now is available in North Carolina through Tryon Distributing, for instance, which is a colleague of mine, has been a colleague of mine for a very long time. But there is also the wines of Georges Debuff, which I'm sure you're going, as a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, the wholesaler of the wine is sponsoring your little get together in a couple of days.
Yes.
And, I do not sell Georges wines anymore, unfortunately, but I have always had not only a great friendship. He and I as I say, go back 40 years.
Yes.
And I love this man. And it's really an image to him that I'm rendering tonight
Yes.
without, unfortunately, selling the wine. But again, Georges has always been and has always offered, because I was his distributor a long time ago also, and has always offered great Grand Cru Beaujolais from Moulin à Vent, Régnier, Saint-Amour, and so forth.
Yes.
And the quality is still there. His son Frank, who has taken over and has been well trained by his father, I can tell you, it's available in South Carolina too by another wholesaler, and the wines are still splendid, and definitely his style, which is, every creator has a style, but they are always very good. The Nouveau is always something that you can rely upon to drink for the next 2 or 3 months. Lots of fruit. I mean, it's a lot of joy, and it's a great introduction for newcomers to the wine world. The Beaujolais, when I was a retailer, we always use as a first step towards serious wines.
Right.
And that was it. So again, the people like Paul Bocuse and me, I mean, like for instance, when they were organizing race, rallies to go to London, where they had the Jackie Hicks driving at the time. Well, you see, when Jackie Hicks had been world champion, you had Pescarolo, Jean-Paul Beltoise, all these people were driving for Georges because there was a lot of fun to do. And at the end, it would be a great meal chez Bocuse, at Lyon.
Yes.
So, but anyway, I'm ready for question if we have any.
All right. I know we have some questions. I apologize to everybody who's still listening. I started the presentation by introducing Jean-Pierre. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm apologizing. My name is Raphaël Moreau, and I do the events at the French American Chamber of Commerce. And tonight we also have, of course, Marie-Claire Ribeil, who is our executive director. We have, there she is, we have also Alain and Gérard, who are doing the business development side of the chamber. And so, Marie-Claire, did you want to ask a question? I know you had an important question for Jean-Pierre, because Marie-Claire knows a lot about wines. Yes.
I don't pretend that I know a lot about wines, but I did travel through Beaujolais, and I had taken my passion to wines and Beaujolais in the last few years, especially because I've discovered that the 2015 were pretty good, actually. And so I have several questions, but one of them is, I know the 15s have been very good, and I've read that they could be kept for 20 years. Is that correct?
There's no question about that, particularly from the village. This is my cat.
Villages, yes, that's what I meant, not the Beaujolais Nouveau. I meant the villages. Yeah.
And the village, particularly the one, let me tell you, the one from Morgon, Moulin à Vent, Julienas, and Brouilly and Côte de Brouilly are really the one that you can keep the best.
Really?
You have to realize that there is an amazing amount of difference in the subsoil. I mean, in the subsoil, they generally are all what you call put in grown in mountainside, or at least hillsides, with very good exposure to the sun, east, southeast, and I cannot turn it off. So east, southeast. So you have root system that go very, very deep on a hillside, which are rocky and granitic hillside. You have root system that goes down 200 to 300 feet. When a vineyard like the one that I have here, this 100-year-old vines there, I can tell you they go down at least 300 feet.
Wow, that's impressive.
What they do, The root system take a little bit of the minerals out of each strata that they cross.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the complexity of the wine comes from. That's where the difference there is between wine from the plain and wine from the hillside.
Okay.
Wine from the plain, particularly if they're fertile, the valley floors, for instance, and so forth, to me, I find them as flat as the horizon. When they come from the mountainside, they start talking back to you because the complexity come from the mineralities of the wine.
Wonderful.
That makes sense? It's pretty easy to understand.
Sense. It makes complete sense. Now, just on that note, are the 18s, do you think, as good as the 15s?
As the quoi?
Are the 2018s as good as the 2015s?
I think 18 was a good, as a matter of fact, 18, like you said, 15 is very good. It's good through the region, up to Burgundy. But I have to tell you, the 2018 in Burgundy, in my opinion, covering the whole area of Burgundy, because it's the greater area of Burgundy. People very often ignore that. Not only includes the Mâconnais in the south, but when south of the Mâconnais, you got basically what they call the Rhone wine coming from the southern part of Beaujolais. But you also have Sancerre. Sancerre is part of Burgundy too, historically. So, and the wines in 18 are, I tell you, some of the Burgundy I've had recently are stupendous. I mean, even for a guy like me, I could be blasé. The light comes on when you drink them. I mean, there's something special about it.
Wonderful. Another question. So I know you have tasted, I have tasted a Macon Rouge before.
Uh-huh.
I'm wondering, are they made of Pinot Noir or Gamay or both?
You can have both. The Mâconnais, generally speaking, is Pinot Noir, but it's not really a super region for Pinot Noir, and they do blend. I mean, Mâconnais technically should be a Pinot Noir, but and by law, I think they have to be a Pinot Noir. But they're light. They're not. You starting better in the Côte Chalonnaise when they are again Côte meaning hillside generally. The Côte Chalonnaise have a more personality than the Pinot Noir grown on the flats, because I don't know if you know the Sun Valley, but the Sun Valley is pretty flat. As you go from Lyon to Burgundy, it's pretty flat and it floods in the winter. So it's the wines are good, but they're not ever going extraordinary. I can tell you that. Which what I'm drinking here again to your health, because I'm getting thirsty. It's really remarkable.
We will drink to your health definitely on Thursday when we taste the Beaujolais.
Please do.
We'll think about you.
Anybody else have any question out there?
Yes, I've got a question. Yes. Did you want to ask them, Raphael?
Yes, I'm going to read a question. I have a question from Robin, and she's saying, right now I'm drinking a wine label, Beaujolais Blanc. That's 100% Chardonnay.
Yeah.
She said, it's excellent. What can you tell me about the whites from the north of the Beaujolais?
Okay, you're right. And they're coming from the north, as a matter of fact. When you are in just above the region of Beaujolais, where the region finish, you have a region called Saint-Véran, which is part of the Mâconnais. Okay. The Beaujolais Blanc is always a Chardonnay. And you can declassify, if the wine growers have an option. In Saint-Véran, for instance, they can call their wine Beaujolais Blanc, which is a way of declassifying the wine. You're a lot better off buying a quote Saint-Véran appellation than a Beaujolais Blanc.
Okay.
But Beaujolais Blanc is attractive to some people because it says Beaujolais Blanc, and it's basically supposed to be a little bit more rare than the Saint-Véran. But I am not sure the quality is better. I would say if I was producing a Saint Véran that is well made, I would call it Saint Véran. I would not call it Pinot Blanc. I mean,
Beaujolais Blanc.
Beaujolais Blanc.
Beaujolais. So it's something recent, right? Because I can't remember seeing Beaujolais Blanc.
Yeah, it's no, they're not that recent. It's been existing for a very long time.
Really?
But basically, this is more of a curiosity than anything else because they can be a Mâconnais, a wine from Saint Véran, which is a very good appellation in Mâconnais. In my opinion, lose some of his luster when he declassified to Beaujolais Blanc.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Marie-Claire, do you have another question?
Yeah, well, we need to say this to you, Jean-Pierre. There's Alain Royer who's saying, watching and listening to you, Jean-Pierre, from Arcachon in the middle of the night. A pleasure.
Wow. That's great.
Let me tell you, Alain Royer is an extraordinary character. He's one of the, not only a great friend, but he's also what I consider maybe one of the best brandy blender in the world. This gentleman is the source of some of the greatest cognac you can ever get, or some of the greatest Armagnac you'll ever get. As a matter of fact, they even fly him in New York, in America, to make some of the great bourbon blend.
Wow.
Oh yeah, he's definitively a friend you need to have.
Well, Alain, you need to send us some of that for our next party.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Are there any more questions from our listeners? I know we have a lot of people from South Carolina tonight.
So Susan Brown is asking, will we be receiving Beaujolais Nouveau this year with the confinement in France and travel restrictions?
No, that's a very good question. Because I don't see the festivity and the announcement that they used to be made. I am sure there is a gentleman, I think, in the audience called Ralph Theriault, and if Ralph can tell you where you can get the wines of Georges Debuff, for instance, in Columbia, South Carolina. He's from Charlotte, but I know he represents Georges Debuff in the north, in this part of the world, and has been doing that for a very long time. And I hope that Ralph is doing very well, and can tell you, maybe, or can tell us if he's on the scene where you can get the wine in South Carolina for Georges Duboeuf.
He
was recorded. I think he was here earlier. I don't see his name anymore.
No, he's not there anymore. No.
Yeah.
But you know, you got great stores in South Carolina. You got Morganelli's in Columbia. You got the Gourmet Shop. You got in Greenville. You got Northampton Wines. You got Greens. You got Total Wine. I mean, there's a lot of people that would have a little bit of it. I'm sure. That's a fact.
Yeah, I have a message from Alain Royer. He says, Jean-Pierre has some of my products in his portfolio. I cannot wait to be back in the US and South Carolina.
That's like him. Yeah, he does. I mean, he's really an extraordinary. This guy is good enough. Let me tell you, you're talking about tasting. He can taste an Armagnac and tell you what kind of machine distilled it.
Wow.
Wow.
That tells you something.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to be an expert and have a special taste buds.
Oh, he's got special No, I mean, I'm serious about that.
Yeah.
Well, I see that Susan's asking about the Beaujolais Nouveau. I can tell you, Susan, that we're going to have Beaujolais Nouveau in Raleigh on Thursday night, and which was sent graciously donated to the chamber by Georges Duboeuf. And so we have a lot of Beaujolais. We have about 72 liters of Beaujolais. So
good. That's good. 6 cases. That's I like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we're very lucky for that, and it's been very tough apparently to get Beaujolais Nouveau this year. So we're very, very lucky. So Susan, if you want to come to meet us in Raleigh, you're quite welcome. And we have Beaujolais Nouveau party at the House of France in Raleigh.
Yeah, on Thursday night,
Mm-hmm.
starting at 7.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's a little far for me.
Yes. Yes.
But you're still invited. And Jean-Pierre, I had a question, maybe the final question. What is your favorite Beaujolais of all?
I think that it's like asking somebody what's your preferred child, your favorite child. But I am a great Morgon fan because these wines really have a tendency to really talk back to you. As a matter of fact, we have an expression in France, the wine y morgonne. The wine morgonne, it's an adjective, means that it's talking back to you. And the other one, I think, is a Moulin à Vent. Moulin à Vent is also the most known, and I think for obvious reason when you taste it. I can tell you the one that I am sipping on right now is absolutely remarkable. And I have the privilege of drinking the best one of the world all the time. And it's very, very well made. I mean, there's no, as I said, in a blind tasting, you really can fool a Burgundy drinker.
All right. Yes.
All right.
Yeah. Do you have the last words, Raphael, maybe? And thank you very much, Jean-Pierre. Thank you for your presentation.
Yes.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much, Jean-Pierre, for joining us tonight and for giving us a terrific presentation on the Beaujolais Nouveau. I've never heard anything like you did this evening. So I think all the people listening, they will enjoy it this coming Thursday. I hope. If they can, I know they can get it. I've seen.
I'm sure you can get it. There's no problem.
I think Total Wine for sure has the Beaujolais. They've had it every year, I think.
No, there's no question. I mean, any good retailer will have some Beaujolais Nouveau. I know that. But it's not, for me as a merchant, it's to start with, it's a big pain in the butt to get the wine, because you got to, we used to fly them in. Now we can get them by boat, but if you meet the right, the
deadline,
the shipping lines, the boats are like airlines today. They overbook. So if your container miss the boat that is going to get you here on time, you're done in. You end up with old Beaujolais Nouveau very quickly.
Yes.
We used to fly it in, I mean, by the airplane load. But I used to pick it up in Charlotte. I sent my truck in Charlotte and picked it up at the airport.
Wow.
But today, it's not what it used to be. I mean, the festivity we used to have with Beaujolais Nouveau are done, and plus this year with the COVID, who knows?
Maybe it will come back after the COVID. People
I hope so. I mean,
they want to have celebration.
If people still listening, if you want to combat the COVID, drink good wine.
Yes. Yes. On that note,
great.
Bonsoir.
Bonsoir.
Thank you very much.
Everybody else, thank you for joining us. Thank you. Au revoir, Jean-Pierre.
Au revoir.
Everybody. Thank you all to all the participants. Thank you.
Thank you.